Hello and welcome to Media7. I'm Russell Brown. This week's show is the story of the wall and the paper, but it's not a home makeover. We'll bring you that soon, but first it's Sam Mulgrew with The Source.
Their Prime Minister called it Japan's worst crisis since 2 atomic bombs vaporised Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was the 4th most powerful recorded quake ever, damaging over 45,000 buildings in Asia's most developed country. It was a force equal to 474 megatons of TNT, moving the country 2.4 metres towards the US. The quake spawned a tsunami up to 10 metres high, in some places reaching 10 kilometres inland, affecting 21,000 kilometres of coastline in Japan alone. Meanwhile, the extent of the radiation leak at Fukushima's 40-year-old nuclear plant is unknown. This, though, is one possibility. The plant was due to be decommissioned last month, and now the world is rethinking nuclear power. On top of this, a volcanic eruption in the country's south. Its sonic boom smashed windows 4 miles away. From the beginning, the world was involved. As usual, Twitter went crazy. At one stage, over 5% of all tweets covered the situation. YouTube videos went viral. The quickest 3 channels to upload footage dominated the most watched flicks. And yet, an Australian seismologist says a monster aftershock, possibly as big as magnitude 8, is still due.
In the last 2 years, the Sunday Star Times circulation has fallen by 14,000 copies. According to Nielsen, it has shed 30,000 readers since 2009. Its latter-day rival, the Herald on Sunday, sells a little more than half the copies of the Star Times, but is growing steadily. As he nears the end of his first year in the job, Star Times editor David Kemmies has overseen a substantial revamp of the paper and endured some controversy. So where is the paper heading? David Kemmies is with me now to explain. Welcome, David.
Hi, Russell.
Well, let's start with the revamp. What were your goals in doing it?
We just wanted to give the paper a fresher look and to get some more content going. We did a lot of work with reader panels, obviously, about what they would like to see in the paper. It's the nature of the business that you're constantly criticised as being too shallow, too trashy, too tabloidy, too up yourself, too smug, too whatever, but it's always prefixed with too.
So what to your mind were the most important changes?
I think to get more content into the paper, because I think it was just suffering a little bit from having not enough good reading in it. But I'm not about to criticise the work that went on before. I mean, I think they were doing some very smart things. We just weren't doing enough of them. Because
it was often criticised before for being somewhat directionless, and in particular not having enough news stories. Did you see that as an issue?
Yeah, I did see that as an issue. And the first thing we did when I first went over there was to actually increase the story count in the paper, which was not immensely popular necessarily with some of the journalists, because it meant that they got slashed and burned in a way that they hadn't perhaps been used to in the past. But luckily we were able to do that in what's comparatively short term, because obviously with more paging now, we're allowed to sort of take the brakes off and give the writers, who at the end of the day are the stars of the paper, give them the space to work in again.
So you're encouraging the long read?
Still a mixture of both of those, I think, because we know that when you have a paper which is going out, which is the only truly national paper, that there's a lot of people are reading it in a lot of different ways, and some people want a quick graze, some people want in-depth analysis and commentary pieces and things of that. So it's about hopefully finding some kind of balance.
Who and what would you say the paper is now for?
I'd say it's a very middle of the road sort of a product, really. It's designed for anybody to get along. You will find we hope you will find some stuff that's entertaining, some stuff that's informative, some stuff that's analytical, some stuff that's comment based, etc. And it's got a very broad base. It ranges from politics through to about town as a section that we kept, which is just social commentary, if you like. There are new sections being added, in particular the culture section, to better reflect the arts community in New Zealand, which we think is important. But generally speaking, there's something in there for most people. But I would say that we do expect to a degree that you have a measure of intelligence, because I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to write 3,000 words on a subject, that's a pretty daunting read for most people.
Now, as I said in that introduction, you've endured the odd bit of controversy. Among other things, you sent a mildly threatening legal letter to Brian Edwards after he published some affidavits that that challenged a story in your paper by Jonathan Marshall. Why did you do that? Because it might be seen as something that a journalist shouldn't do to another journalist.
Well, your researchers might have let you down there a bit, actually, mate, because I'm the only editor in the town who gets himself in trouble when he's actually on holiday, and I didn't send the letter, in fact. But that aside, it was sent by the publisher, and I fully understand why he chose to do that. At the end of the day, you know, Brian expects us to believe that completely out of the blue, Amanda Hotchin came along and suddenly decided that she would start engaging with Brian. Now, Brian is a paid pen, that's what he does, and on the back of that there was a launch obviously of a campaign, the famous Hotchin campaign, which ran in the Herald and on television, etc., which we were not engaged in. But Brian made repeated claims that the story was made up, and that is an extremely serious thing.
I actually don't think he did, but not on my reading of that blog post. I think he presented the affidavits, you know, for what they were worth.
No, he didn't. He said he had he had seen 4 affidavits, which we certainly haven't seen. We're led to believe that there are 4 affidavits because Amanda Hotchin says so, but that would have to be Mark, which would be an interesting affidavit, because that would be one that said, I saw Jonathan and ran away. Then there was 2 cleaners, 2 servants attached to the property. Well, I shouldn't say servants, but two cleaning staff of some sort that were attached to the property, and Amanda. Now, only 2 people know for sure what went on. Amanda and Jonathan, and I have no reason at all to disbelieve Jonathan. And I think that Amanda almost probably believes herself that she did not say it.
I still can't see, I must say, why you needed to get lawyers involved. Another little bit of controversy, the unruly exit of Steve Bronias. Was that solely about his use of a rude word to a reader who'd been mildly rude to him?
Yes, it was, yes. Yes, that's a standard of behaviour we wouldn't accept off any of, or that certainly that I would not accept off any of my staff members, and Bronias was never a staff member, of course, because he's an independent columnist, so effectively he's working for himself and contracting to us, but he's still representing us at that point. Now, provoked or otherwise, you just can't go about sending emails to people of that nature, you know. You need to stop and think.
It did seem that he and the reader had kissed and made up. So could
no,
he not merely have moved
No,
on?
I don't. I think that's actually, Steve has painted it as if they had kissed and made up, and in actual fact I think that's not entirely correct actually, but only, again, Steve and the reader in particular know the truth of that matter, and there it shall rest. But I'm certainly not about to sit here and make an apology for getting rid of somebody who, and quite frankly it wasn't me that got rid of him. Again, these decisions are not made in isolation. There were several people involved in that, but I'm certainly not about to apologise for having a standard that says you will not send to readers.
One of the other changes in the revamp was you dropped a couple of columnists and you elevated Michael Law's column to basically the lead of your op-ed page. What was it that appealed to you about Michael Law's that you put him in such a prominent place in the paper?
No, we didn't do that either, actually. Michael Law's was kept as a columnist, that's certainly true. And again, this was principally off reader feedback, which was that they, in fact, did not believe people needed to be famous or noted or anything like that. They just needed to, so the profile wasn't important. What was important to them was the level of the writing and the intellectual concept of the argument and things of that nature.
And you believe you get that from Michael Law's?
Not necessarily, but what we do believe is that clearly Finlay and Rosemary have a level of skill that means that they can be used in the paper in some other areas.
So they're likely to turn up there
so
again.
They'll turn up in the paper.
Now,
otherwise.
Michael Law's column last Sunday, which I thought was deeply unpleasant, our researcher rang you to let you know I'd be asking you about this. Your response was, well, I'd better read it then. I mean, how much of the paper do you not read before it's in print?
Surprisingly, quite large sections of it, obviously, because we have section heads who do that, and they are tasked with doing the best they can within the orbit of what they do. So obviously the business.
But this sits directly opposite the editorial in the paper. Do you not think you should read that, particularly given the nature of the person writing it?
Not particularly. I'm of a mind that the people who are in charge of those things are perfectly capable of making those decisions. If they were significantly concerned by those pieces, they would bring them to me. Having said that, you know, I'm not here to defend Michael Laws, because Michael Laws has a radio station of his own that he can aptly defend himself.
But he's in your paper. Well, anyway, now that you have read his column, what did you make of it?
I thought it was absolutely typical of Michael Laws. Not especially reasoned, not especially clever.
It's in your paper. You're the editor.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go into what he said. He vilified a disabled man. He mocked his appearance. He applauded the beating of that man. and then he advocated more vigilante violence in Christchurch. Are you proud to have that in your paper?
Look, Michael has an opinion that is his own. Michael's opinion is not the opinion of the Sunday Star Times any more than Don Nicholson, the president of Federated Farmers' opinion is that of the Sunday Star Times. It's a kind of interesting one because you do get into the arguments about free speech, etc., etc. And given that, Michael, I did notice that Michael actually name-checked you in his own column, so you're hardly impartial on this.
Which is absolutely not the case. I mean, he had a few choice words for me. I've said worse about him.
Yeah,
I don't mind about that. It's more what he had. It was a nasty attack and also an incitement to violence. I mean, at some point, you keep saying, all the way through this interview, you keep shirking responsibility. I didn't send that letter. I didn't read the column. At some point, you have to take responsibility
that's not shirking responsibility.
For what goes in your paper,
That's fact. It's not my fault if you sit here to me and say, you sent the letter to Brian Edwards, and I say, well, no, I didn't actually. There's nothing to do with me. I was away at the time. I had no knowledge that it was going on. That's not shirking responsibility. That's pointing out where you are wrong. And it's something you need to take up with your researcher. As opposed to taking responsibility for laws, I will take responsibility in the sense that I'm the editor and everything, the buck does stop there. But quite frankly, you know, an incitement to violence, I'm not aware that people ran out into the street and bashed people suffering with Asperger's. This is a man who, you know...
Yeah, he described Ari Smith as feral and a rat. And he said, in the end, justice has been done, black and eye and all. Now let's similarly identify the other Christchurch looters and mete out similar justice. This is sitting right opposite the editorial in your paper, David.
You're not seriously suggesting that you think people are really going to go out and burn looters in Christchurch, are you?
Well, I suppose it depends on how much attention they pay to Michael Laws.
Exactly. There's a range of responses about it.
Are you aware that there has been a criminal complaint about that column?
No.
Well, it's gone to the Auckland Police. What would be your response?
I can't comment on something I'm not aware of. A criminal complaint in what sense?
And that it was an incitement to violence, which it quite clearly is. Mete out similar justice. He's saying do violence.
Well, I can't comment on that. That's for the police to decide.
What will you be saying to Michael Laws?
I will be saying to Michael that he does have a responsibility to stay within the bounds of good taste. Personally, do I think that's an extreme? I find Michael, I would have to say, I find his columns frequently are questioned on taste, etc. But he's a very interesting guy because while we will get, every weekend we will get X number, why do you keep this mongrel Laws, he does this, he does that, etc., etc. We will get as many letters saying, thank goodness for Michael Laws, he's the only sane voice in a sea of political correctness, etc., etc.
Oh, well, good luck with being his editor. Thank you, David Kemeth. After the break, the rights and wrongs of a quite different medium, graffiti.